up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be a review and a first impressions on the new Naked Reloaded palette. I had no intentions of picking this up. I think I put it in like a what's new video and kind of mentioned that I wasn't really blown away with it. But I want to say a huge thank you to the guys in Urban Decay Ireland because they sent it out to me. And I'm super appreciative of it because it just gives me like a little bit more insight into the palette, what it's actually like, and do I recommend it to you guys. And if it's something that you're looking at and you're kind of like hemming and hawing over picking it up, then I might be able to give you a little bit more insight into it and a little bit more direction on whether you need it or not. This is what the outside of it looks like. Obviously the box, very exciting, but inside we have the palette and this is what it looks like. So it is actually such a pretty palette because it comes in this like squishy, like kind of like fabric material box, very different to their other Naked palettes. This has been the replacement palette for the original Naked, which I also have here, and I'm just going to like compare them side by side also. But the other palette that I'm seeing a lot of people comparing this to is the Sultry palette from Anastasia Beverly Hills. And I also have that in my collection, so I will kind of compare them, or we'll look at them side by side. I love how this palette like flips right back. So we have all the shadows there in front of us. On the end here we have two bigger shadows, so the shadow Blur and Bribe are a lot bigger, and then the shadows right beside them are just a teeny bit smaller, but they're still bigger than the rest of the palette, and that's Barely Baked and Boundaries. And then all the shadows here in the middle are kind of like standard pan size, so you can see that there's a little bit more product in these two end shades, and then definitely this one and this one as well. There's 12 shadows in this palette, which is the same as the original Naked. On top of each other, in comparison, they're very, very, very different. Now there are obviously some similarities in it, but like we don't have that gunmetal shade at the end. There is no kind of like dark black shade or kind of like a charcoal black, so I never really found Creep to be very, very black. Some of these shades here in the center, like Half Baked, Smog and Dark Horse, could be compared to maybe Barely There, Dreamweaver and Distilled. So you can see that there are some similarities, but you know, to the naked eye, looking at it, it is a very different palette. There's a lot of warmth in the new Reloaded palette that we didn't have from the original Naked palette, which I found to be quite neutral, but you can see that they are very different. So the other palette that it was compared to was the Anastasia Beverly Hills Sultry palette, which I actually just got into my possession. So this is the Sultry palette and this is the Reloaded palette, which in my opinion, these probably look more like alike than the Naked original and the Reloaded. So they definitely have a very similar color story going on. There's definitely a lot of shades that are similar, like you can see like Retro and Bloom, you can, you know, the pops of like reddy pinky shades in it, and also like some of the golds, they're quite similar. That Angel Fire shade is very similar to Pearl. Then you've got Endgame, which is kind of like dystopian, and Distilled, which is a little bit like teak. So there are a lot of similarities in these palettes, I find, more so than the original Naked. I've used this palette and really, really like it. Find that it blends quite well. Really like the quality of the shadows. So we're gonna put this one to the test. But I am gonna swatch the shadows first, just so we can see what we're working with, and then I'm gonna do a little tutorial and then kind of like give you my thoughts on this palette and what I think of it. Do I recommend it or not? This is an up close of the palette. You can see all the shades there in all their glory, and I'm just gonna swatch them for you guys so we get a little bit more of a idea what we're working with here. So I'm going to start on this end and work my way up. So we've got Bribe first. So it's a really nice creamy shade. Next we've got Barely Baked. And that's a really nice shade, quite buttery. Angel Fire. Again, quite buttery. It does have chunks of glitter in it, though, I will say that. Retro, which is a really nice pink shade. Got Reputation, which is like a rose gold toned shadow. Next to that we have Burn, which is an absolutely gorgeous shade. Both those shadows swatched really, really well. They're quite buttery and very creamy. Next up is Endgame. It's a really nice deep matte chocolate brown. Dreamweaver. It's a little bit on the chunky side. It's almost like a duochrome shadow, like where it goes from like brown to a little specks of blue in it. I don't know if you guys can see that on camera. Next up is Distilled, which if you remember from the original Naked palette, it's quite like Dark Horse. It's just a really nice taupey brown. We have Booked, which is a nice matte brown. It's definitely on the warmer side. And then we've got Boundaries, which is a warmer brown. And finally Blur, which is a very skin tone like shade with no shimmer in it at all. It's matte. So they're all the shades swatched. They swatched really, really well. I'm not going to lie, they did swatch quite well. There's a little bit of chunkiness in some of these shades, especially Dreamweaver, and I found Angel Fire, but the rest of them swatched really nicely. And now we just got to play with them on our eyes. I'm just going to pop some concealer on my eyelid because I haven't used primer in the longest time ever, so I'm not going to start now. So I'm just going to use Blur on a big fluffy brush here just to set my concealer on my eyelid. This is not going to add any colour, I'm guessing, because it's kind of like more of a skin tone shade. Okay, so there's a little bit of kickback from that shadow, nothing kind of outrageous, nothing that we haven't seen before from other shadows. Set my concealer quite well, and it added like a teeny bit of coverage to my lid, like where it just, I don't know, you can see from this side to this side, it did add something to the eyelid. Okay, so next up I'm going to go in with the shade Boundaries, which is this shade here. It's like the warmer brown, and I'm just going to pop that straight through my crease. Just going to blend up my crease. Blend up my crease? Build up my crease. Wow. So far this shadow is blending quite nicely. Nothing kind of outrageous. It's nothing special, nothing I haven't seen before, but it is quite nice and easy to blend. I'm going to go in with Booked next. I know in comparison to Boundaries it's not much deeper, but I'm just going to use it in my crease and take it just a little bit lower, like almost onto the lid. To be honest, both those shadows kind of like merged into one. So I'm going to take Endgames here on this fluffy blending brush, and I'm going to apply that just to my outer V and just bring it through my crease as well. I'm noticing that this shadow is a little bit patchy. I don't know if it's the pigmentation of it, but I am kind of struggling to blend this one in a bit. So I'm just going to kind of work on blending that a bit more. That is probably the best that can get that brown to look from blending and blending and blending. I feel like it's just, even on this side, quite patchy. Anyway, I'm going to move on to the shade Burn, which is a shade here, and it's like a rose gold shade. And I'm going to apply that into the middle of my eye, just here. Oh my god, that shade is amazing. That's a super pretty shade. It's definitely got a little bit of like bronze to it as well. I'm going to take this shade here, Barely Baked, and I'm just going to pop that into the inner portion of my eye. Just a really, really, really light gold shade. It's not like showing up massively on the eye. Okay, I'm going to take the shade Angel Fire, and I'm just going to pop that right into my inner portion or inner corner of my eye just to open it up. Oh, that's a really nice shade. And then with the shade Bribe, I'm going to pop that underneath my brow bone. Okay, so I'm going to pop Boundaries underneath my lower lash line. I just popped on some lashes as well, guys. I'm going to take Boundaries and just blend it the whole way underneath my lower lash line, from inner to outer, and just kind of bring it down just a little bit. And then just on the outer corner, I'm going to take Endgame, that really deep brown, and just pop that just on the extreme outer V of my eye, just to bring the top and the bottom kind of eye look together, I guess. Okay guys, so I want to give you my overall thoughts on the Naked Reloaded palette. Now, I just want to say that I did try the Sultry palette from Anastasia Beverly Hills just this week for the first time. It's the first time using it, and I definitely feel like the shadows in that performed a little bit better. Not gonna lie, just a little bit better. So who do I recommend this to? Well, for the price point, because this is a lot cheaper, if I didn't mention, than the other Naked palettes, which retail roughly around for €50. This is between 42 and 45, and it is actually just been released this week, so you'll be able to get your hands on it pretty soon. Now, I do recommend this for somebody who maybe has a very small collection and maybe not that many neutral eyeshadows in their collection, and they want to like branch out and get something new. This is quite handy. It's also quite travel friendly. It's slim, and the material in it means that nothing's going to get shattered and broken. And I do love the selection of colours in it as well. So I think there is a lot of pros to this eyeshadow palette. It's also quite easy to blend. Now, I know I did have a little bit of problem with Endgame. That was the only one I had a major problem with. The rest of them blended really easy. So it is great for somebody who might not have their blending skills like down to a T. Like, I mean, I'm not amazing at it, so don't feel bad if you don't. I do find that this palette is like very easy to work with. I feel like all the shadows are quite cohesive together. They go well together. There's no struggling to kind of come up with looks with this. It's very basic, but it does the job. So if you are looking for a basic eyeshadow palette and you just want something with a lot of neutral shades in it, and maybe like even just like a little bit pop pink, you know, for Valentine's Day or when you want to go cray cray. But you know what I mean, guys. There is like that little pop of colour in it that kind of gives it a bit of a difference. If you were him and hawn over maybe the Sultry palette and you didn't know whether to pick it up versus this one, I think I would go with Sultry myself personally, just because it has a little bit more diversity in it. You know, there's silvers in that, and then it has the matte black. I just feel like for me this palette is much more unusual. But if you are not really into like any of those shades I said, like a matte black or, you know, silver shades, then definitely go with this. This is a much easier palette to work with. You don't have to think too much about the looks. I'm not trying to say that people aren't creative or anything, but just if you just want a basic eye look and you just don't want to be like faffing about with loads of different colors and, you know, just trying to figure out what to do today, this one is something that I would recommend. I wouldn't recommend this to somebody who already has the Sultry palette, or somebody who maybe isn't really into these neutral shades, or for somebody who has a lot of neutral shades in their collection already. You more than likely can probably dupe all of these shades. I do like it. It is lovely. It blended really nice in my eyes. It's nothing out of this world. It's nothing new. It's nothing revolutionary. It's nothing that we haven't seen before, but it is a really nice palette. Is this my favorite Naked palette from Urban Decay? No, I wouldn't say so. But it definitely is a nice addition to my collection and I do enjoy it, and I'm going to play around with it a bit more, and it will totally be a palette that I dip into when I want just like a basic neutral look. So it's going to get its use in my collection. I don't know much else to say about the palette, guys. It's all up to you whether you think you need this or not, and I just hope that you enjoyed my review and that you found it helpful. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up. If you'd like to see any more reviews coming up soon, or whatever you would like to see video wise, let me know and I can sort that out for you guys. Thank you again for watching, and I'll talk to you in my next video. Mwah! Bye guys!